How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by one of the world's leading authorities on strength and power training for sports athletes. Today, I am joined by the one and only Dan Baker. How are you doing?
Well, what have I been up to? Well, I'm not really coaching much anymore since COVID shut all the borders. I got stuck in Bali, Indonesia. So I live in Bali, Indonesia now. I've been living here anyhow, but I got stuck here, couldn't leave for a couple of years. The borders are all closed. Australia would try and throw you in jail if you try to get home at some point. So I'm serious about that. They threaten jail to people from Indonesia or India if they try to come to Australia. So I'm just really, I'm working more as a coach educator now than a hands-on coach. I'm no longer at the sort of cold face of coaching athletes. So what I do is coach coaches now in my various roles with the ASCA as an educator and, taking ASCA level 1, 2, and 3 courses. And so coach education, coach mentoring, things like that is what I'm doing now rather than coaching the athletes like I used to.
Yeah. And I know obviously you mentioned there about COVID, because I know with Australia, especially with like the lockdowns and those sorts of things, everything came to a standstill. I know obviously when we spoke previously, obviously had been over in India. Is everything kind of getting back to normal in terms of your travel and the courses that you're running?
Yeah. So I was in India early this month, and we conducted a ASCA level 1 course at the Inspire Institute of Sport there. That was the first one that I've conducted over there since 2019. They did a couple during COVID, depending on what restrictions were on at various times. So the ASCA course is still going on in India, but I didn't take any. We had some of our local ASCA members there conducting courses. But yeah, it looks like things are back to normal now. I mean, pretty much everyone's over the whole stupidity of COVID, and almost everyone in the world's had it, or had the vaccine, and all of a sudden they didn't die. And so I think we're all pretty much back to normal. So I'll be doing courses everywhere from now on again.
Oh, great! That's good. I must admit, from being over in the UK, in terms of everything getting back to normal, gyms back up and running, everything seems to be, it's as though it didn't happen, which is a crazy thing to think about. So obviously I did a little bit of a brief introduction there, but obviously your time in strength and conditioning, the teams and the athletes that you've worked with. For anyone who might not know your background and your gravitating towards the education that you deliver now, do you want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
So I did a bachelor degree in human movement studies or basic sports science back in the early 80s. And then, I was waiting for sports in Australia to get professional like the US, and it just wasn't happening. So I thought the only way I'm going to get anywhere in life is I've got to do a master's degree. So I did that in the early 90s with Professor Rod Newton and Dr. Greg Wilson. And then, one of the best things that could happen for people like me is Ben Johnson popping positive in 1988 at the Seoul Olympics. And then the Olympics starting to clean things up in that period, 4 years, between 88 and 92, having proper drug testing. And then when proper drug testing come in the early 90s, like WADA and all that, it allowed coaches who are drug-free like myself and always been drug-free, it allowed you to work, because you couldn't, the coaches who are around from the, Eastern Bloc countries, Russia, all that, hey, I want my athlete to be stronger here, have some oral chewable. There we go, it's done. There's no real science to it, except, how long does it take for oral chewable to clear from our body? 5 days, no worries. So that's never been the way in Australia, really, and, with our government-funded sports. So in the mid-90s onwards was a better time to get some work with government-funded Olympic athletes, and then also pay TV came in with the rugby league and rugby union, and all of a sudden sports wanted to be professional in Australia. And that's how I sort of got started. So I was with the Olympic type of sports first, diving and a few others. And then I started working with the Brisbane Broncos Rugby League and the Queensland Reds and Rugby Union at the same time. So I'd just ride between the two.
Yeah.
I was just working as a strength coach for both of them. And then I finished with the Reds after 2 years, and I just worked solely with the Broncos the rest of the time as my role expanded more then because I had more time. So I was doing strength and conditioning. I mean, I really was doing strength conditioning the whole time when I was at the Broncos, but it said strength coach. But you're still running with the boys doing intervals or long distance runs or whatever. This coach just says strength coach doesn't mean you're not going on a 8K run through the bush with them. Sorry, boys, 5 reps. I stopped. No. So I worked the Broncos for 19 years, and I finished there in the end of 2013. But so my background's mainly been with rugby league and rugby union, but I used to compete in powerlifting. I trained a lot of powerlifters in the late 80s and early 90s, and I worked diving and a few other sports, some track and field athletes and field hockey, MMA, the whole gamut you sort of work with. And, before the Broncos, worked at the next tier down, the feeder clubs that used to feed into the Broncos. It was called Redcliffe, and who will be in the Premier League of the NRL next year after 20-something years. They finally made it. And, so I've worked across all those levels, because when you're at a club like Redcliffe, you're working with 15-year-olds all the way through to their state league team, which is second division. And then when you're at the Broncos, you same thing. We have kids from about 17 playing in our teams, our under 17 team, under 19 team, or under 20 team, whatever it would be that year. But we'd have guys on recruitment type scholarships, and you'd give them basic programs to do at home, in their own. They still play for their local clubs until they got to 17 or 18 and they play for us. So, I was working across age groups from elite pros down to 15-year-olds who are doing their first program. So that's always good, in the one club to have that longitudinal development of athletes across, so I was there 19 years, and there's some players I trained for 12, 13, 14 years.
Oh, wow.
Even Petro Sinasiva, who's a great player for Australia. Like, I had him at Redcliffe before I went to the Broncos. He was 17. He was a centre, and he's squat 140, bench 100. By the time he leaves the Broncos, he's a front row rugby league forward playing for Australia. Squat 210, bench 160. So you're seeing those changes across their body, across a longitudinal period, and that gives you, I think, good insight into training. And with the ASCA, I've been involved with the ASCA since the beginning. Originally, we were NSCA Australia, but the NSCA, their certification means nothing in Australia. We have the level system of level 1, 2, 3, or introductory, then 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, depends on the sport, how they want to call it. So we set up our own thing, Australian Strength Conditioning Association, and we follow the Australian coaching pattern. So we're fully integrated with the Australian Coaching Council and Sports Australia, and we integrate, and we're recognised as the body who certifies strength conditioning coaches in Australia. So that's what we do with the ASCA. So, I help design all our courses, from introductory coach, which is like for mum and dad, soccer mums and dads, footy mums and dads, who are not real strength conditioning coaches, but they need to know how to structure a warm up. And like we jokingly call it "Don't Kill the Kids" course. 3 hours, no barbells. It's how to stretch, how to do bodyweight exercises, how to do a warm up and train. Don't kill the kids. Then we have level 1, level 2, which is our professional level. So our level 2 is probably akin to the UK SCA.
Yeah.
Or we link it that way. Our level 1 is lower, and then we have a level 3 above that as well. So I help with all those course content and teach at all those different courses.
Oh, great. And from there, because obviously you've mentioned, from the middle of the Olympics when sports becoming, more professional, and obviously your experience in, coaching, working with elite level sport, who were kind of your influences on coaching, and has that changed kind of over time from the coaches that you've worked with or learned from?
I learned from a lot. I used to read a lot. So anyone, a lot of the authors of the NSCA journal articles back in the late 80s and 90s, I read every single one of them. So I would say there's a lot there. And obviously people who, I read a lot of Soviet Sports Science Review that I used to subscribe to that journal as well. So I used to read a lot from the weightlifting and powerlifting coaches, but also, from the track and field coaches, because they're adding something, for weightlifting and powerlifting, I joke when I say it's quite simple. Whoever lifts the heaviest weight, and the training's hard, but you're not integrating other stuff in that's contradictory. Track and field, are starting to do a little bit of stuff. If you've got to throw, he's got to do throwing skills, weight room stuff, speed stuff. And then when we go to, so when you look at the track and field stuff, they know that there's sometimes these things don't fit and we got to modify them around. And then when you go to, any of the rugby or football, it's the same thing, except now I've got aerobic conditioning coming in as well. And so I would say I've got a very eclectic and wide influence. So I'll read virtually anyone who's got experience, because some people have experiences that you don't have. Like, so if I had to go teach high school girls now at age 13, and I used to in the 90s, the girls are different now. They're far better athletes now than they were in the 1990s, because in the 1990s, they're scared they're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so they didn't really do much. And that's what I'd say to you all the time. I'm not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, am I? I don't think so. But I'd have to go and read something about what's current with the 13-year-old girls or 14-year-old girls, whatever. So I'd have to go read someone who mightn't even know, but you just have to sometimes get someone else's knowledge where yours has been lost, or it's 30 years ago or something. Yeah. So I'm a big reader of lots of different people, and especially the weightlifting, powerlifting coaches, because they're the strongest guys and girls in the world. So you've got to listen to what they say, but therefore you also got to look at who's the fittest people in the world. Okay, so I've got to look at what the distance guys are doing. Okay, who's the fastest guys? So I got to read what they're doing, and then so how we integrate this. So I've got to look at what people in soccer and field hockey and rugby are also doing, because we've got to integrate all this stuff, and MMA as well. So there's a lot of reading to be done.
I can imagine, yeah, and especially there's always something that you can learn from what other athletes are doing, and then that kind of goes into obviously gravitating more with the Olympic sports, and then obviously the work that you did with the Broncos. How did that sort of form your systems, and how did that change over time from things becoming a lot more professional?
Yeah, basically athletes just got more professional. Like with diving, it was pretty simple. That the head diving coach gave me a simple mandate. Steve Foley, his name was, and he said, basically your job is to make them jump higher, because the higher they jump off the board of the platform, there's more distance before they hit the water. So you got more distance, more time to do all your turns and all that maneuvers, and also to jump higher means you got more speed to do those things. So he said, basically your job is to make them jump higher. And they look a little bit better, a little bit tighter standing there. That'll be helpful too, because sometimes they might get a half point just for being more aesthetic. And, it might help with the getting cut-offs and that, so they're getting a 7.5 instead of a 7. But make them jump high. That's the main thing. But they look a little bit better. That's okay. But make them jump higher. So that was a really simple thing. So we measured jump. And if you remember, this is the early 90s. None of them had lifted weights before, Olympic athletes. They do plyometrics 4 days a week. So what we did is we took 2 of the plyometric sessions out and just did strength training. squats, jump squats, power shrug jumps, step ups, a little bit of upper body, not much. And it was super effective, of course. Yeah, they're Olympic athletes, some of them, but with zero training age for strength, extensive training age for plyometrics, but with zero for strength. So, hey, let's start squatting. All of a sudden, our vertical jumps are going through the roof, low-hanging fruit. So that just shows, that an athlete might be an Olympic athlete, but the training age could be zero in the gym or zero for squatting, And then same when I went to Broncos, you would think that, even in 1995, guys that have a reasonable training age, but a lot of these guys back then, you were sort of semi-pro then, and a lot of them, they maybe lifted weights, but I would say they dabbled in weights.
Yeah.
And, when I came in, I made it very systematic, very regimented, very military type thing. And, that worked then, and got good results because, again, that was sort of some raw material that was easy to mold. And we had a lot of great guys at that time. And we won the title 3 times in the first 5 years I was there. So that was really good. We had a good core group of players who were pretty ruthless trainers. So we just needed to point them in the direction of where we're going and say, this is what we're lifting today, boom, boom, boom. And they did it, and it was the same for their, aerobic work or speed work. We just, point them in the direction, tell them what to do and do it. We had some characters there too, but they at least they train. When I say characters, old school guys who people think that they don't train hard, but they did train hard. It was they project their off-field images. I just muck around, but they actually train pretty good. Like Alan Langer's one famous guy, Alfie Langer. People think he didn't train hard, but he was actually a really hard trainer. But away from the cameras, and when the camera's on, Alfie's just mucking around and knock about below. He actually trained pretty hard.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So yeah, it was just everything then was a little bit different too. How I would coach was a lot different to how I finished coaching. You could be much more almost military then. You sort of can't do that now. Everyone's woke and easily offended and stuff like that. So, what I could say or what the players said to you or to each other, it wouldn't happen now. So we have to make sure that we coach with the times. So your coaching style has to evolve with the times, sort of thing, and the people. So I think that's happened, and that it did happen even back then. If I'm coaching the divers and I've got 6 females, there's no way you coach them because they're individual sport athletes, for one, let alone divers 13 to say 21, the same as a bunch of 6 meathead rugby front rowers. You can't coach them the same. With the girls, the females, you have to be, well, back then you have to be more empathetic, and they're individual sport athletes. So that whether they're male or female divers or track and field athletes, the individual sport athletes are more prima donnas type thing. Rugby guys are a team sport, so they're not prima donnas. It's all about the team. So even then, you have one head, one face you put on for coaching females or individual sport athletes, another one for rugby. This face for a 17-year-old rugby team. This face is for the bigger guys. You just, what mask am I putting on to coach with today? What methods am I using to communicate with these athletes to get the best results? So even back then, it was different every session, depending on who we're coaching, but it would be even more different today because some of the methods or some of the ways we talked or communicated then, we can't do that now. certain things we can't say now.
Do you think sometimes, though, just touching on that, Obviously, trying to speak to the person or athlete that's in front of you. Do you think, regardless of whether it was, when you first started coaching to, when you left the Broncos or, took a step away from coaching, do you think that's what gets buy-in, and then that's what gets the results from the program?
Yeah. I mean, how we coach and how we talk to the athletes and build that buy-in, and it is different in individual sport athletes. They take much greater ownership of their performance and their training, as they should. Whereas in a team sport, some of the guys, they can blame it on their teammates, they can blame it on the ref. No, we didn't win because the ref, there's always a bit of a shifting of accountability in some of them. Not your true professionals, but some of them, And in a team, if you got too many of these, some of them to shift accountability, that's when you're in trouble. So what we're trying to always develop is a culture of accountability where you're accountable for your performances in the gym, on the training paddock, whether we're doing, aerobic running, speed work, or more game-specific stuff. You're accountable for your performance. Don't go blaming anyone else, and if you only got 4 hours sleep last night, whose fault's that? Yours, things like that. So we want accountability, and we want to build a culture of accountability, because that's how you get growth. You need to see, well, I want to achieve this. Well, what am I doing to achieve it? And what are the roadblocks or the speed bumps that are, stopping me achieving it? I've got to take accountability where I can for those things. And, what are the changes I need to make in my lifestyle, in my attitude, all those sorts of things. One of my head coaches, Wayne Bennett's a famous coach in Australia, he had a saying, wherever you go, you take yourself. So we see some of these players, they always transfer, and I had a problem with that coach, and they transfer. Everywhere you go, there's a problem, mate. What do you think the real problem is? You. Everywhere you go, you're taking yourself and you're getting problems. You're the problem. You're just shifting it to everyone else. So, that's what we want is accountability in our athletes. In the end, that's what we're trying to build. That we're, if they're happy to say, listen, we don't want to be too committed, which, if there's a 16-team comp, we're happy to come 11th. Yeah, fine. That's what you're happy with. Pretty sure the people paying you aren't, but that there are some guys who are there. They're journeymen. They just they're happy to come 10th or 11th, or get the jersey on the weekend, or they're not fully committed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's important. It's that thing of if you're accountable and put that work in, there's going to be results at the end of it, especially when it comes to a team sport. One thing that you said at the start, obviously reading about what are the powerlifters and the weightlifters doing, what are the sprinters doing. Obviously, at the start, adding in some strength training or adding some structure around there is going to get results. How did that balance sort of shift over time? Because, when you look at, even if you look at powerlifting, they're probably, even though it's an amateur sport, they're probably a lot more professional in how they conduct themselves now in terms of the training and everything's around that. And that's probably the same in rugby in terms of how that's progressed.
Yeah.
Does the balance of training and sort of problem solving in terms of what's going to work best change as it's progressed, or was there any challenges in terms of changing that as the athletes got more developed and maybe needed a little bit more?
Good question. Every year every year you should be reviewing. As a coach, you should be making yourself accountable and looking at your results and what do you need to do to improve your programming? Are you going to conferences? Are you talking to people? So I think most coaches I know are always reviewing their own programs and their results and going to conferences. So I think it's just part of our evolution. I don't know if I did it any different to anyone else. And everyone I know does this. I mean, all high-level coaches do review and find themselves accountable, and because they're the ones I talk to at conferences and courses. That's part of their self improvement and professional development. So I don't think I'm any different than anyone else. I think we're all, if you listen to a podcast, that's you trying to improve. isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
you're trying to educate yourself and, learn from other people in situations that you haven't been in. So, yeah, I think we all just do that. I don't think I don't know if there's any real change. Like, if you look at some of the great powerlifters from the late 80s, early 90s, Ed Cohen, well, he'd still smoke these guys today. A lot of, not all of them, but a lot of them,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the training is much better today in powerlifting. We see that. A lot more people are squatting a lot more, or deadlifting a lot more weight, benching more. You see that. So the training is better, but it's been incremental type thing. So I think year to year, it's just got slightly better, and so I don't think there'd be any radical changes. I think that I would do. Just what I was doing was mirroring what was happening in the powerlifting world at the time, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Because with the because when it looks at the as things, there's always that case of what's being done on the gym floor is sometimes replicated in the research. And do you think that sometimes the research is just catching up to what's happening in the gym?
The research is miles behind most of the time. They're miles behind. And I know because I've published 40-something papers. I was holding off on some of them papers for years before I'd publish it. The coach said, don't publish any of that stuff till we won another grand final, stuff like that. So, they're miles behind. And then even when they do it, what's the research? Another 24 college-age students took a study, 12 in the control group. So those sort of studies where they're using college-age students and trying to infer this is going to happen with a high-level athlete, they're, for me, they're necessary studies, but it applies to that cohort, college-age students. A lot of the better studies now, just reporting data from, this elite athletes. Here's what 5 cyclists from the British cycling team did for, this block, and here's their results. That's, for me, is a better type of study because it's looking at the elite level, because that's harder to get that data. There's a million studies on college-age students, and that's good data too. And but we need that data points in between, like, okay, there's the elite, here's this level, and here's the college students. Then we can sort of infer something there like that. And that's, the research always is a mile behind what we're doing in the gym floor, a mile behind. It sort of just validates it all, gives you an easy study, an easy application.
So and from obviously you mentioned there about the studies that you did. Is that more sort of, again, just to validate what you were doing, or have influence on on other coaches, especially with the on sort of the rugby league players that you would work with?
Well, I was always curious, like, I'll give you one example. The NSCA brought out a guy, Angel Spazov from Bulgaria, and he once for an NSCA conference, he talked about the Bulgarian method versus the Russian method. So if we look at complex training or power training, the Russian is there heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light. And he said, no, the Bulgarian system is better. It's, work up, go heavy, and then just drop weight. So you might squat 100, then 80, then jump squats with 60, then jump squats with 40, jump squats with 20, and then just body weight jumps. So descending, whereas the Russian might be, 100K, 40K, 100K, 40K, something like that. Now, one of my studies, I looked at power output doing bench press throws going up or down. I was like, well, what is better? You got this guy saying this method's better. And so that's one of my studies. I was just trying to find out stuff, does complex training work as good with 90%? Well, not in the upper body anyhow. It doesn't. I've got the research, we got results doing 65% and 30%, or 35% as the lighter load. You don't need to go to 90%, not for the upper body anyhow, to get a post-activation potentiation effect. So, a lot of the stuff was, I just wanted to know, I read a lot of the stuff in the late 80s, early 90s in NSCA journals and people's opinions. So when you read a lot, you're there, I don't know which one's better.
Yeah.
So I'll study it and see. And finally okay, I know this works better for this exercise, or I don't need to go that heavy for that exercise, and so on. And people say, oh, it's normal to lose 30% strength in season. Yeah, really? No, it's not. If you lose 30% in season, what are you? I've got a lot of studies where we put a lot of data in there across 15, 17 years, and we don't lose any strength in season, or if we do, it's like 2.5 kilos, which is, less than 2%, on a bench. So if a guy bench 140 and then the season's 137, it's not much. So, but when I started, people saying, oh, losing 20 or 30% in season, that's pretty normal. No, not for me, it's not. As a powerlifter, you can't say, oh, well, I used to bench 100, now I'm benching 70. You can't accept that. Well, I used to squat 200, now I'm squatting 140. Nah, So a lot of the stuff I did when I did studies was just, I'm curious. That's why I read a lot. I want to know what is the answer. So studies were driven by curiosity. I want to know the best way to train my athletes to get the best return on the training investment, so they can win the football games or jump higher and go to the Olympics, or if they're divers or whatever sport they are. We want to get the best sports outcome by the best gym training or whatever training we're doing with them.
Yeah, so definitely. Yeah, it's much better to find out yourself from that curiosity, rather than just taking someone's, oh well, this is better. Well, actually, how is it? And exactly like what you said about losing strength in season, then if you're a rugby player and losing 30% of your strength, that's not going to do well if you're tackling or trying to run in with running the ball, even on performance.
One of my former interns, and he's a strength coach now, he's the strength coach now of the Broncos. He did his study, one of his PhD studies on tackling. He found tackle technique in rugby league players, and we'll assume it's the same in rugby union because he looked at under the ball and over the ball, is most highly correlated to squat strength. And if your squat dropped off in season, it would correlate it most highly, it was over 0.7, with a decrease in the effective tackling technique. So it's like, here it is. This is a beautiful number of studies he did on tackling in rugby league and rugby union players. And it just validates that you can't afford to lose strength in season, because the guys who did had a drop off in effective tackle technique, and guys who gained strength a little bit in season improved slightly in effective tackle technique. So he had these markers, objective markers, to identify tackle technique. So there's one thing you just can't afford it to. And that's Michael Speranza. Anyone looking for that research? Speranza. So Michael Speranza. You got about 6 or 7 papers on tackle technique and strength and correlations and stuff like that. So, Again, he was driven by curiosity to do those studies. Yeah. Okay, what's the best things in the gym I can do to improve tackle technique? How to identify good tackle technique and so forth. So, again, just curiosity. And we find out the answers.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll probably, my first thing from that, having, played rugby myself, not at any elite level or anything, but it's kind of that maybe common sense of, you do need to have, some level of strength and keep that level of strength when you're playing sports. So having that sort of validation, like what you said from the research, is kind of just catching up, and then it'll be a case of, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense now. That kind of goes on to, because especially, again, from athletes having not much training in the gym, and then adding simple things in that's going to allow to have an impact on their performance when it comes to sort of training loads, because as athletes are getting stronger, as athletes are getting fitter, how did you manage those, or did that change in terms of managing how they're working as the athlete? Because every rugby player, or at the elite level, they are athletes, but also rugby players or divers or anything like that. Yeah,
no, I really control loads very strictly, very strictly. So in season, I would have 3-week cycles, my 3-week wave cycle, where it's about the first 3 weeks. If we look at the 6-week total volume, the first 3 weeks have about 55 to 60% of that total 6-week volume, and the last 3 weeks have, about 40 to 45% of that 6-week volume. And then one day's got 60% of the volume, one day's got 40% of the volume, give or take a couple of percent. But I was pretty strict on that. So that way, you know the outcome. Oh, sorry, if the load is known and then something bad happens on the field, it's not the change in the load, because you've got these same loads week in, week out, because 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So I had this wave cycle even before I started at the Broncos and when I was back at the state league team. So I know that the response, there's not a spike in load here or a spike in load or decrease in load too much. It's a fluid thing. So once we control loads, we take away that as a variable or an excuse, and we increase accountability. So here's a known load. Here's how we responded to it before. We got a problem this day. Let's accept that it's not the load, but something else has happened to these athletes. It could be the travel. It could be, whatever. Is it every athlete? If it's every athlete in the team, it's something the whole team has done. If it's 2 or 3 athletes, it's something their lifestyle. Now, sometimes guys, they get a baby and they can't sleep as well. We know that. We have to do things about that because they've got to get up every second. It's not fair on the missus to get up every 2 hours to pat the baby and give them a bottle. So these guys are getting up, disrupted sleep. Okay, let's change their loads this week in the gym because they're not sleeping as well. They're not recovered. But if it's guys who just, well, I'm not sleeping much because I'm, got girlfriends texting me at like 1 a.m. kind of come over for a, a quickie type thing. And we've had that, we say, guys, get your girlfriends to message you at 10, or just turn off your phone.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So when load is known and we've got lots of data points saying that we would perform this well on this much load, when there's a change in sports performance, we can take out load being a factor in most cases. It's another thing, a lifestyle thing or a preparation thing. And it could be travel. It could be something else. But we should normally have taken the load into account when we know there's a bad travel situation anyhow. We might reduce load that week anyhow. Field training or pitch training, we might reduce that. But just managing load allows us to take away unknowns. Here's a stimuli. We know the response to that stimuli. We're going to, if our performance changes on the field, there's something else going on here. And that's what we've always found. It's a lifestyle factor. Because unless it's the whole team, it's a lifestyle factor. And one of these situations where we're stuffed up once, we flew to England to play a World Club Challenge. We lost. We came back to Australia. And then, the coach said, well, I want you to still train hard. I said, last week or second last week of pre-season, still train them hard this week. We've flown all the way back from England. So been to England and back twice in a week, over and back. And we tried to train hard that week. And, 5 RMs, those being guys getting 2 or 3 reps and failing. Then we had a trial game where we lost 40-0 in a trial game. And we won the championship the year before. And it's like, we just overcooked them in this thing. So that was the whole team. Load with travel was the factor. We're trying to do a pre-season load, like the last big week, with travel. And so that was our fault.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to do the same load, but without hard travel. So, when we control loads, we get accountability again. There's a change in performance, something's got to be accountable for that change in performance. In that situation, we should change load there and stuff after the flight back from England.
Yeah.
Because we changed the loads going there, but not coming back.
Yeah. Do you think with that, because obviously there's that question of injury prevention, is it actually injury prevention if no one gets injured, or can you prevent an injury if it just actually happens? Do you think having those, because obviously you mentioned there about if it's not the whole team, it's a lifestyle factor that you can control quite a lot of things and get more out of the athletes and more I don't know what the word I'm looking for, maybe consistency of training, because, you know, to get the best out of the athletes, they need to play more. You know, if they're a good player,
Yeah.
you want them playing.
Yeah. Oh, my biggest thing, injury prevention, is trying to win. So if
Yeah.
you're winning, you get less injuries. If we look at a game like rugby or league or union or something like that, where, you know, you got people making contact. So if this one here dominates and goes forward, then this one's getting eccentrically driven back. So there's an eccentric load, you're getting driven back. You've got more chance of injury, eccentric. So my big thing is win. When you're winning, you're more concentric. You control the movements more about what's going to happen. So you want to reduce injuries, train for performance, train to win. Sure, we could need to do a few little things here, and you know, there's certain muscle groups that need an extra tickle here and there, like, you know, hamstrings or rotator cuff. Of course we do that, but that's also performance enhancement. We don't just do Nordics and rotator cuff to injury prevention. We do it because, hey, if I get a stronger rotator cuff, I'll be able to press or push more. If I get stronger hamstrings, I'll be able to sprint faster more often and score more tries and things. So for me, injury prevention is part of performance enhancement. I always train for performance enhancement.
Yeah.
You know, like I always say to people, how does standing on a BOSU board, bouncing on one leg, prepare you for running into 310 kilogram men who want to smash you? There is no, you know, get under a squat bar or something and do some wrestling if you want to prepare yourself for that onslaught with those three big gorillas. You know, and I've been saying that for. I said that at a conference in like 1998 or something. And went, oh, that's really radical speaking. Yeah, go run into those three gorillas. I tell you, it's not a pleasant experience. It's like, you know, oh God, you know, if anyone ever do some, you know, wrestling is a big indicator of when someone, if you do wrestling with someone who's much bigger than you, you'll understand strength, power, and aggression. And when they think about injury prevention, just land on the bottom of a couple of wrestling throws and think, well, yeah, that BOSU ball really prepared me for that. Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, then people say, oh, BOSU ball, what about surfing? Surfing's on a hard surfboard, not on a soft rubber thing. There's BOSU ball. Turn the BOSU ball upside down and do some push-ups on it, so it's a bit unstable, but with your hand on the hard surface, maybe. But, you know, standing on a BOSU ball, that sort of injury prevention, I see that as a, you know, waste of your time. You know? Yeah,
definitely. And with that, because obviously, you know, doing more of the coach education, with that, obviously, I know we've touched a little bit on the training side of things, but from your obviously your experiences of, you know, at the coalface coaching, if you like, when it comes to the education side of things, do you find that actually, you know, there's lots of information, because you've said there in terms of the research on the training side of things, it's more the education of how coaches, you know, speak to athletes, how they get buy-in, how they can, you know, actually, you know, make people realize that, you know, the strategies are there, but it's they're the coaches that have to, you know, show that it works, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one of the things in our ASCA courses is we have a module on how to coach, on coaching, on communication, on teaching, on reinforcement, of using cues. So that's really big for us because, you know, a program is just words and numbers written on a piece of paper or typed on paper or in your phone now, you know, but how we communicate those things is part of coaching. So we want to communicate not just words and numbers, but how to do things. And we're trying to reinforce, you know, exercise technique is a behavior, and behavior can be modified. You know, technique modification is behavior modification. So we're doing things to modify behavior or to reinforce good behaviors, good technique. So that's all about communication, various things that we do. And the ASA is really big on that, how we say to the coaches, listen, when you see good technique, these are the things that reinforce to the athlete what they just did. And if it needs to be corrected, then we're going to use one of these methods here. one of these things to challenge that or to modify that behavior, So, a lot of that comes from the psychologist, Brent Russell, and he worked with US and Canadian swimming, and I'm going back a long time now, maybe back to the 80s, 90s. So people wouldn't have heard of him, but, no one existed before Instagram. And, but, he had a very simple approach, of a 3-part reinforcement. Simple positive praise. Good, excellent, well done. Why it was good? Oh, nice knee drive. Good blast off the chest. And then if it needed to be corrected, if there's a slight mistake, chest up more than the next rep, chest up, or whatever it might be. If not, it was beautiful. You say, and again, repeat. There you go. 3 steps, simple positive praise. Why it was good. The reinforcer, if it was good, just go again, repeat, or a corrective reinforcer, chest up more, next rep, or, you wouldn't give too many lengthy words. It would be chest up. You want to reduce the cognitive overload. But, that's one of the things we sort of try and teach, that allows you to be a better coach, to communicate better. And obviously this changes with the athlete. Some athletes are visual learners. You might film with your phone and show a lot, So, for example, we identify that most Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, they tend to be more visual learners. So giving them too many verbal cues is not going to be so good. If you can film with your phone and show, look, here, I want you to go up more like that.
Yeah,
that's probably going to be more effective coaching for a lot of Indigenous people and a lot of sports people too, but especially Indigenous ones, for Australia at least, culturally. So, how we communicate then has to also change due to dominant learning types that we have. Is it a visual learner, a kinesthetic learner, verbal learner, auditory learner? And if you coach deaf athletes, and we have sometimes, or partial deafness, well, you're going to learn other ways because verbal cueing ain't working.
Yeah,
simply,
definitely. Yeah.
So,
and the main thing that you said there that kind of jumped out to me is, what is effective coaching? If you've got someone who's partial hearing, there's no good, trying to do verbal cueing. So finding out what works, because if not, it doesn't matter what program you've got there. If you can't communicate it, if you can't get, get the best out of them.
They're just words on paper, words and numbers on paper. Like I always say to people, in the day of the internet, you can go get a great program off the internet for free. There's someone who will put one up for the program, and you'll find one that probably suits you. If you scour the internet, you'll get a great program for free, but you're not being coached in that program. They're just words and numbers on a piece of paper. Well, what do they mean? Well, it's the coaching then that is the main thing. In our job, we write a program. It doesn't take that long, but we're employed full time. What do we spend most of our time doing? Coaching.
Yeah, definitely.
Teaching athletes an exercise once. After that, we're coaching the exercise. So we spend most of our time coaching, but most of these certification courses that I see around the world spend most of their time looking at how to write a program. That's great. How about you spend some time about how to communicate and coaching of the athlete? Because guess what? That's what we spend most of our week doing. Writing a program is the easiest part of my week. I sit in a dark room and it's done. Cut paste from the previous cycle. That didn't work. Get rid of that. Put this one in. She needs this. He needs that. Boom, boom, boom. Done. Just put some chill out music on in the background. Now, the next 35 hours this week, I'm actually coaching.
Yeah, definitely.
So we need, that needs to be our core skill of, we need to write good programs. But, and often what we see is young coaches, and I know you mentioned about pathways in the email we send to each other. Well, if you get a job sometimes in a pathway, you're given a program to implement. You're not even writing the program now. So you're implementing someone else's program. So you're not actually even writing. You are coaching. But yet, most of the certifications around the world are not concentrating on teaching strength and conditioning coaches how to coach, how to communicate, effective technique, how to modify for different body types, They do a little bit of that, but not reinforcement, cueing, things like that. They're focused more on program writing. Well, he's got this problem, use this corrective exercise. That's programming. Do the FMS, and if he's got this problem, do that. I'm not picking on FMS. I'm just saying, this problem, slot that in. That's programming. It's not cueing.
Yeah.
We
Definitely.
use verbal cues, physical cues. Oh, let's put a band around his knees. Activate the glutes more. That's a physical cue. That's cueing. So yeah, we can. I think we shouldn't. Most of our education, I shouldn't say most of it. The biggest change to coach education, I would suggest, is actually concentrate more on teaching coaches how to coach and communicate. Because the program writing, sometimes you're not even doing that when you first start off. It's like, here's the program you're going to do this for 17-year-olds, or 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
So,
and especially with that, if you're in the gym, you're going to be speaking to the athletes, you're going to be speaking to other coaches, and that's going to be the majority of the time, because, the amount of time that you're going to be programming compared to coaching, you're spending a lot more time on the gym floor or out on the field. Quite a lot of topics covered there, Dan, and a few tangents thrown in. The last question that I like to ask, though, is that from everything that we've chatted about there, obviously the training side of things, the coaching side of things, what would be, or for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Read a lot, but you have to have some method of assimilating. There's so much information now. Where I see is people get lost. They have so much information, they cannot slot it where it should be. This applies to these elite athletes, not to 14-year-olds, or this is a good exercise for 14-year-olds, but we can still use it for elite athletes, but as a warm-up exercise. And I'll give you an example: goblet squats. People write programs for goblet squats with elite athletes. Yeah, goblet squats are great. I do them as a warm-up exercise before I squat with a barbell, not as an overload exercise. So there's a lot of information. Take it all in, but then start to try and assimilate, where this does this slot in. And remember, okay, well, an elite athlete in certain sports might be very low level in strength conditioning, and what's a average level power lifter is still stronger than, a lot of pro rugby players or something like that. See 60 kilogram females weightlifters show squatting 180. So they're doing a lot more than a lot of guys can. So realize that there's a lot of information we need to integrate or realize where it is. Draw up continuums. So you got plyometric exercises. Draw up your continuum plyometric: beginner, intermediate, advanced, in place or longitudinal, moving plyometrics, horizontal, I should say. Start to do that. Build up your banks. What's your main exercises, secondary exercises, third exercises, and things like that. And then start to have a data bank of, well, these are the normal strength levels or max aerobic speed levels for these athletes. The information's all out there. I mean, we put a lot of it in our courses, ASCA, but like I said, 180K squat for a female weightlifter weighing 60 kilos is pretty good, but it's, the top 5 or 6 girls in the world are doing that. Yeah. It's less rugby guys are doing a full squat for 180. So we got to say, okay, well, this level of strength, that's elite in weightlifting, it's a 200K squat's pretty good for a male rugby player, 2 times body weight. But for a powerlifter, it's like yawn,
Yeah.
Unless you're 400 pounds, it's nothing, 2 times body weight. So we just have to have those things, that what's normal in certain sports is pretty good in other, or vice versa. This is pretty good in rugby. That's actually shit level in weightlifting, powerlifting. Or this is a pretty good bench press for tennis, 1.2 times body weight or something. Yeah, but that's pretty shit for rugby, and it's even worse for powerlifting. But we just can't mock an athlete. Oh, he's only doing 1.25 body weight. It's a tennis player, or she's a tennis player, or whatever they are. Try and get data. That's normative data for different things for these sports. so you can understand where in their journey they are, what stage of development, what sort of programming then you can help bring them in at, because sometimes we just come in at certain points of an athlete's career. You get taken in and here's an athlete, like I said, these are elite divers, already been to the Olympics. But they've got zero squat strength, so squat training, so let's do that. Years of plyometrics. So just realize that we have lots of knowledge. Start integrating where that knowledge is, and trying to think about where you would or how would you program for different sports based on their strength levels and what they need to be. So that that not everyone has to have a 3 times bodyweight squat. 2 times bodyweight squat's great for male athletes in almost all sports. 1.6 for females is great in almost all sports, but not for powerlifting, weightlifting, and track and field. Sprinters, we want a bit more, but for most other athletes, it's great. So I think we just need to step back and see those things, and have education beyond what the university is giving us. More practical based coaching knowledge and ability to put things into context. Contextual knowledge is probably what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. It's making sure that whatever the athlete that's in front of you, rather than trying to compare it for something that isn't relevant to their sport. Thanks a lot, Dan, for taking the time to jump on. Really enjoyed chatting with you today. If anyone's got any questions about what we've chatted about today, or wanted to reach out or ask you any questions, where could people find you or reach out to you?
Just email me via my website, Dan Baker Strength, or email me danbakerstrength@gmail.com. That's the easiest way.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
I still use email.
Thanks a lot, Dan, for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening. No worries at all. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.